People say first impressions matter most. But sometimes, my dears, the most life-changing moments happen when we're at our absolute worst. 6 months ago, my granddaughter Emma thought her life was falling apart in an elevator. She had no idea that her tears would catch the attention of the most powerful man in the city, a man who never smiled, never showed emotion, and certainly never helped anyone. This isn't a fairy tale about a prince saving a damsel. This is the story of two broken people who found something unexpected in each other. Something that would shake the foundations of one of the world's largest companies and teach an old grandmother like me that love still finds a way, even in the coldest places. I'm Margaret Rose Thompson, 74 years old, and I've learned that the best stories aren't about perfection, they're about two imperfect souls colliding at exactly the right moment. Before you hear what happened in that elevator, subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Because some stories need to be shared with the world, this story begins on a Tuesday morning in September, in the heart of Manhattan, inside the glass tower of Blackwell Enterprises. If you've ever walked past those buildings in Midtown, the ones that stretch so high they seem to pierce the clouds, you know the kind of place I'm talking about. Cold, intimidating, the kind of place where dreams go to either flourish or die. My granddaughter Emma was 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in marketing and more student debt than hope. She'd been working as a junior marketing coordinator at Blackwell Enterprises for exactly 3 months. And on that particular Tuesday morning, she thought her career was already over. Let me tell you about Emma first, so you understand why this story matters so much. Emma is my youngest son David's daughter. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, where her father worked double shifts as a mechanic and her mother cleaned houses to pay the bills. Emma was always the smartest kid in her class, always reading, always dreaming of something bigger. She got a scholarship to NYU, worked 3 part-time jobs to cover what the scholarship didn't, and graduated at the top of her class. Getting hired at Blackwell Enterprises was supposed to be her big break, the moment all those years of sacrifice would finally pay off, but corporate life isn't kind to girls from Queens who don't know how to play the political games. Emma's direct supervisor, a woman named Victoria Chen, was one of those people who saw kindness as weakness and fresh talent as a threat. For 3 months, Victoria had been systematically undermining Emma, taking credit for her ideas, excluding her from important meetings, criticizing every detail of her work in front of others. Emma tried everything. She worked harder, stayed later, produced better results. Nothing worked. Victoria's campaign against her only intensified. That Tuesday morning, Emma had been called into Victoria's office at 8 o'clock. Victoria sat behind her massive desk with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emma, we need to discuss your performance. I've been reviewing your work over the past 3 months, and I'm concerned. The quality simply isn't meeting our standards. I think it might be best if we discussed a transition plan." Emma's heart dropped into her stomach. A transition plan? I don't understand. My project metrics have all exceeded targets. The Johnson campaign I developed brought in 15% more engagement than projected. Victoria's smile grew colder. "Emma, you're very young. Sometimes we overestimate our contributions. The Johnson campaign succeeded because of the team's efforts, not individual work. I've already discussed this with HR. We'll give you 2 weeks to improve. But I want you to understand that your position here may not be sustainable long term." Emma left that office feeling like she couldn't breathe. 2 weeks. They were going to fire her in 2 weeks, and there was nothing she could do about it. All those years of struggle, all that debt, all those dreams ending because one insecure woman decided Emma was a threat. She made it to the elevator bank on the 42nd floor before the tears started. She pressed the button for the lobby, thinking only about getting outside where she could fall apart in private. But the elevator didn't go down. It went up. When the doors opened on the 68th floor, the executive level, Emma's heart sank even deeper. She frantically pressed the closed door button, but it was too late. A man stepped into the elevator. Not just any man. Alexander Blackwell himself. The CEO, the legend. The man whose face appeared in Forbes and Fortune, always with the same expression, cold, calculating, utterly devoid of warmth. He was 42 years old, devastatingly handsome in that cruel way some men are, and reportedly more machine than human when it came to business. People called him the Ice King behind his back. In 5 years as CEO, no one had ever seen him smile. No one had ever seen him show a moment of genuine emotion. Emma knew she should wipe her tears, should compose herself, should do something other than stand there crying in front of the most powerful man in the building. But she was so tired of pretending, so exhausted from trying to be perfect, that she just stood there with tears streaming down her face. Alexander Blackwell stepped into the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. And then, for the first time in 5 years, something unprecedented happened. He looked directly at Emma, really looked at her. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was deep, controlled, exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire before 40. Emma should have said yes. Should have apologized for her unprofessional display. Should have done what every corporate survival instinct told her to do. Instead, she laughed a bitter, broken sound. "No, I'm not all right. I'm about to lose my job because my boss feels threatened by me, and there's nothing I can do about it because people like me don't win against people like her. But thank you for asking, Mr. Blackwell. I appreciate the concern. From someone who's probably never had to worry about paying rent or student loans or whether one bad break will ruin everything you've worked." The elevator descended in silence. 40 floors of absolute quiet while Emma realized what she'd just done. She'd insulted the CEO. She'd been sarcastic and rude to Alexander Blackwell himself. If she wasn't getting fired before, she definitely was now. But when she finally dared to glance at him, she saw something impossible. The corner of his mouth had moved. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. Something that looked almost like recognition. "What floor do you work on?" he asked as they passed the 30th floor. 42. "Marketing department. Who's your supervisor?" "Victoria Chen." Something flickered across his face. "I see." The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. Emma expected him to walk away, to forget this encounter the moment he stepped outside. Instead, he turned back to her. "What's your name?" "Emma Thompson. Miss Thompson, I'd like you in my office at 9 o'clock this morning." 68th floor, sir. 9 o'clock, he repeated. And then Alexander Blackwell did something no one had ever seen him do. He smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. And it was directed at my granddaughter. When Emma called me that morning, she was terrified. "Grandma, I think I just destroyed my career. I was crying in an elevator and the CEO saw me and I said something horrible and now he wants to see me and I don't know what to do." I laughed, which probably wasn't helpful. "Sweetheart, sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Go to that meeting. Tell him the truth. What do you have to lose?" What she had to lose, as it turned out, was everything she thought she knew about Alexander Blackwell. At 9 o'clock sharp, Emma stepped off the elevator onto the 68th floor. The executive level was like another world, all glass and steel and intimidating modern art. A secretary who looked like she'd never smiled in her life directed Emma to Alexander's office. The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Alexander sat behind his desk, and standing beside him was another man Emma didn't recognize, tall, in his 50s, with kind eyes that seemed out of place in this cold environment. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming. This is James Morrison, my Chief Operating Officer and the closest thing I have to a friend. Please sit down. Emma sat, her hands trembling slightly. Alexander studied her for a long moment. I looked into your file this morning. Your work on the Johnson campaign was exceptional. Your metrics across all projects have exceeded targets by an average of 18%. Your ideas, as documented in the system, show innovation that this company desperately needs. So I'm curious, Miss Thompson, why would Victoria Chen want to fire someone who's objectively one of the best junior marketers we have? The question hung in the air. Emma could have played it safe, could have made excuses, could have protected Victoria to protect herself. But she was so tired of playing games. Because I'm good at what I do, and I don't know how to pretend I'm not. Because I come from Queens and I didn't go to the right schools or join the right social clubs. Because I ask questions when I don't understand something instead of nodding along. Because I actually care about the work instead of just caring about climbing the ladder. Take your pick, Mr. Blackwell. Any of those reasons would be enough for someone like Victoria Chen to see me as a problem. James Morrison made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Alexander's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. You were right this morning, Miss Thompson. I've never had to worry about rent or student loans. I inherited this company from my father, who inherited it from his father. I've never had to prove myself to anyone because my last name did it for me. But I do know something about people who are threatened by competence. And I know something about feeling trapped in situations where the rules seem designed to keep you from succeeding. He stood up and walked to the window. My father built this company on fear. He believed that people worked harder when they were afraid of losing everything. He believed that emotion was weakness and that the only thing that mattered was profit. When I took over 5 years ago, I tried to change things. I tried to make this company about more than just money. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what that actually means. I became exactly what I was trying to change: cold, distant. More concerned with maintaining power than using it well, he turned back to face Emma this morning in the elevator. You looked at me and saw exactly what I've become. And you weren't afraid to tell me. Do you know how rare that is, Miss Thompson? Do you know how few people in this building would dare to be honest with me? To be fair, sir, I thought I was already getting fired. I didn't have much to lose this time. Alexander definitely smiled. Fair point. Here's what I'm proposing, Miss Thompson. I want you to work directly for me for the next 6 months. You'll report to me, you'll work on projects I assign personally, and you'll have complete autonomy to implement your ideas. In exchange, I want you to do exactly what you did in that elevator: tell me the truth about what you see in this company. The good, the bad, and especially the ugly. Emma stared at him. You want to hire me as what exactly? A corporate consultant, a spy. I want to hire you as someone who still remembers what it's like to care more about the work than about office politics. Someone who hasn't learned to hide their tears yet. Someone who might help me remember why I wanted to change this place in the first place. James Morrison spoke up. If I may, Alex, this is highly irregular. Miss Thompson has only been with the company 3 months. There are protocols and hierarchies that allowed Victoria Chen to try to fire our best junior marketer because she felt threatened. Protocols and hierarchies that have turned this company into exactly what I swore it would never become. I'm the CEO, James. I can be as irregular as I want. Emma took a deep breath. If I say yes, what happens to Victoria? Victoria Chen is no longer your concern. I'll be having a conversation with her and with HR about management practices in the marketing department. That conversation doesn't depend on your answer to my proposal, and if I say no, Alexander met her eyes. Then you go back to your desk on the 42nd floor, you complete your 2-week improvement plan, and we pretend this conversation never happened. But I hope you don't say no, Miss Thompson. I think we could both use someone who's willing to be honest, my granddaughter. That brave, brilliant girl looked at the most powerful CEO in New York and said, "I have conditions." Both men looked surprised. "I'm listening," Alexander said. "First, I want everything in writing. Contract, responsibilities, salary adjustment, everything. Second, if this doesn't work out, I want a recommendation letter from you personally and 3 months severance to find a new position. Third, I want to know why. Why me? Why now? What happened to make the great Alexander Blackwell suddenly care about what some junior marketer thinks?" The room was silent for a long moment. Then Alexander Blackwell did something even more shocking than smiling. He laughed. It was rusty, as if he hadn't used those muscles in years, but it was genuine. "You're absolutely right to ask. The answer is, I saw my sister in you this morning." The words hung in the air. James Morrison's expression changed completely, becoming softer and sadder. "I don't understand," Emma said quietly. Alexander sat back down, and suddenly he looked less like an intimidating CEO and more like a man carrying a heavy weight. "My younger sister, Caroline, worked in this company 5 years ago. She was brilliant, passionate about making a difference. She had ideas about how to make Blackwell Enterprises more than just a profit machine, how to make it actually matter. My father shut her down at every turn. Told her she was too emotional, too idealistic, that business wasn't about feelings. She tried to prove herself, worked herself to exhaustion trying to meet impossible standards. And then one day, I found her crying in the parking garage. She looked exactly like you did in that elevator this morning, someone who'd given everything and was being told it wasn't enough. What happened to her?" Emma asked, though something in Alexander's expression told her she might not want to know the answer. "She left, moved to California, started her own sustainable fashion company. We barely speak now because I didn't defend her when it mattered. I let my father drive her away because I was too much of a coward to stand up to him. When he died and left me this company, I told myself I'd make it different. But I was so focused on being strong, on never showing weakness, that I became just like him. This morning, seeing you in that elevator, it was like the universe was giving me a second chance. A chance to be the person I should have been for Caroline." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm not your sister, Mr. Blackwell. I can't be your redemption project. I know that. But maybe you could be something better, a reminder that this company is supposed to be about people, not just profits. That it's okay to care about things. That showing emotion doesn't make you weak. It's a lot of pressure to put on someone you met crying in an elevator. Yes, it is. Which is why I'm asking rather than ordering. And why I'm willing to meet your conditions. All of them." Emma looked at James Morrison. "What do you think about all this?" James smiled. "I think Alex has been waiting 5 years for someone to challenge him. I think you might be exactly what this company needs. And I think if you're smart, which your file suggests you are, you'll negotiate for an even better severance package. And that's how my granddaughter went from almost losing her job to working directly for one of the most powerful CEOs in America. But this isn't where the story gets interesting, my dears. This is just where it begins. The first week was surreal. Emma moved from her cubicle on the 42nd floor to a small office on the 68th floor, right down the hall from Alexander's. The gossip spread through the company like wildfire. Who was this unknown junior marketer? What had she done to catch the CEO's attention? The rumors ranged from the ridiculous she was secretly related to him to the offensive she must have slept with him. Emma heard them all and tried to ignore them all. She had more important things to worry about. Alexander wasn't kidding about wanting honesty. Their first project meeting, he handed her files on the company's top 5 initiatives and said, "Tell me what's wrong with them." Emma spent 2 days reviewing everything: the sustainable packaging project, the diversity hiring initiative, the community outreach program, the employee wellness plan, and the new product development strategy. When she came back with her assessment, she didn't hold back. They're all performative. The sustainable packaging looks good in press releases, but doesn't actually reduce environmental impact significantly. The diversity hiring brings in people from underrepresented groups, but doesn't address the toxic culture that drives them away within 2 years. The community outreach is just photo opportunities with no real investment in the communities. The wellness plan offers gym memberships, but doesn't address the crushing work hours that make people sick. And the new product development is focused entirely on what will make money rather than what people actually need. She expected anger. What she got was intense interest. Go on, Mr. Blackwell, everything this company does looks impressive from the outside. But it's all surface. It's all about maintaining image rather than making real change. And the people who work here know it. That's why morale is terrible. That's why the best people leave. That's why someone like Victoria Chen can thrive here, because the system rewards people who look good rather than people who do good. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Fix it, excuse me? You've identified the problems. Now I want you to fix them. You have full authority to redesign all 5 initiatives from the ground up. Report directly to me. Ignore anyone who tries to interfere. Show me what this company could be if we actually meant what we said." Emma stared at him. That's millions of dollars in budget. That's involving every department. That's going to make me enemies throughout the entire company. Yes, it will. Still interested? My granddaughter fought about all those years of struggle. All those nights working multiple jobs while studying. All those times she'd been told she wasn't good enough, wasn't the right fit, didn't understand how things worked. And she smiled. When do I start? You already have. The next 3 months were the most intense of Emma's life. She assembled a team of people from different departments, the ones who still cared, the ones who hadn't been completely beaten down by the corporate machine. She met with community leaders, environmental experts, employees at every level. She challenged every assumption, questioned every "that's how we've always done it," and ignored every attempt to slow her down or water down her ideas. And Alexander backed her completely. When department heads complained, he told them to cooperate. When executives questioned her authority, he made it clear she spoke with his full support. When the board of directors raised concerns about costs, he faced them down in a way he'd never done before. But something else was happening too. Something neither of them expected. They were becoming friends. It started with their daily meetings, where they'd review progress on the initiatives. Alexander would ask questions, Emma would explain her reasoning, and somewhere in those conversations, they'd drift into other topics. He told her about growing up with impossible expectations, about loving a company while hating what it had become, about the loneliness of being a leader everyone feared. She told him about growing up with nothing but dreams, about her parents who worked themselves to exhaustion so she could have opportunities they never had, about the guilt of success when the people you love are still struggling. One evening, working late in his office, Emma made a comment about being hungry. Without thinking, Alexander ordered food not from some expensive restaurant, but from a small Thai place in Queens that Emma had mentioned was her favorite. They ate takeout on his impossibly expensive office floor, and he asked her about her neighborhood, her family, the life she'd lived before Blackwell Enterprises. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Sometimes. It was simpler. Hard, but simpler. You knew who cared about you and who didn't. You knew what mattered. Here, everything is complicated. Everyone has agendas, including me." Emma met his eyes. "Especially you, Mr. Blackwell, Alexander. When it's just us, call me Alexander. Why? We're not friends, Alexander. You're my boss. Are you sure about that? Because I can't remember the last time I told a boss about how my father's expectations crushed any chance of me figuring out who I actually was. I can't remember the last time I laughed." And I definitely can't remember the last time I cared what someone thought of me. Emma set down her food. This isn't a good idea. What isn't? This, whatever this is becoming. You're Alexander Blackwell. I'm a girl from Queens who still has student loans. This doesn't work in the real world. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've both been living in the wrong version of the real world. They looked at each other across the remnants of Thai food, and something shifted. Something that would change everything. The night Emma called me, scared and confused, was the night she realized she was falling in love with Alexander Blackwell. Grandma, I don't know what to do. We work together. He's my boss. Everyone already thinks I slept my way into this position. If anything actually happens, it will destroy everything I've worked for. I asked her a simple question. Does he make you happy? When I'm with him, I forget to be afraid. I forget that I'm not supposed to be good enough for this world. I forget everything except that I want to know everything about him. Then that's your answer, sweetheart. Grandma, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You've spent your whole life being afraid you'd fail, afraid you weren't good enough, afraid to take up space. This man saw you at your worst and thought you were extraordinary. Maybe it's time to stop being afraid, but Emma was right to be worried. Because the closer she got to Alexander, the more enemies she made. Victoria Chen was just the beginning. When word spread that Alexander was actually implementing Emma's redesigned initiatives that he was making real, changes that would cost money and disrupt comfortable power structures, the resistance intensified. Senior executives who'd spent years building their empires found their territories threatened. Board members who cared only about quarterly profits found their priorities questioned. People who'd thrived in the old system saw Emma as a threat to everything they'd built. The campaign against her was subtle but vicious. Documents went missing. Team members were reassigned without explanation. Information she needed was suddenly classified as confidential. Anonymous complaints about her competence were filed with HR, and through it all, the whispers continued. She's sleeping with him, she's manipulating him. She's going to destroy the company. Alexander noticed, of course. One day he called Emma into his office and closed the door. I know what they're doing to you. I can handle it. You shouldn't have to. I could end this with one announcement, one clear statement of support that would make it clear that attacking you means attacking me, and confirm every suspicion that I'm only here because of you. No, thank you. Then what do you want me to do? Emma took a breath. I want you to let me prove myself. Let me present the new initiatives to the board next month. Let me show them with data and results that this isn't about you and me, it's about what's right for the company. And then let them make their decision based on merit, not politics. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. You're asking me to risk everything you've built on the chance that the board will see reason. I'm asking you to trust me the way I've trusted you. I do trust you. That's not the question. The question is whether I trust them. Then maybe it's time to find out what kind of company Blackwell Enterprises really wants to be. The board meeting was scheduled for the first week of December. Emma had 6 weeks to prepare a presentation that would either vindicate everything she'd worked for or end her career at Blackwell Enterprises. She worked day and night, pulling together data, testimonials, projected outcomes. She coordinated with the team she'd assembled, making sure every detail was perfect. And every evening, when the building was empty, she and Alexander would sit in his office and talk. Not about work, about life, about dreams and fears, and all the things they'd never had the courage to want before. One night, a week before the presentation, Alexander told her something he'd never told anyone. My father died in this office. Heart attack. He was working late, reviewing quarterly reports, and he just collapsed. By the time anyone found him the next morning, it was too late. I think about that sometimes, dying alone in an empty building, surrounded by papers full of numbers that don't mean anything in the end. I don't want that to be my story. Emma, I don't want to wake up at 60 and realize I spent my whole life building something that doesn't matter. Then don't, Emma said simply. Change it. You have the power to make Blackwell Enterprises into something that actually means something. Do I? Or am I just the latest inheritor of a machine I don't know how to stop? You're whatever you decide to be. That's terrifying and amazing at the same time. Alexander reached across the desk and took her hand. It was the first time they'd touched beyond professional handshakes. Emma, when this is over, when you've given your presentation and proven to everyone what I already know, I want to take you to dinner. Not as your boss. Not as colleagues, as whatever we're becoming. And if the presentation fails, if the board decides I'm a liability, then I take you to dinner anyway. And we figure out what comes next together. Emma should have pulled her hand away. Should have reminded him about professional boundaries and corporate policies. But she was so tired of being afraid. Okay, it's a date. They smiled at each other across the desk. To people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found each other in an elevator when both of them needed it most. The night before the board meeting, Emma couldn't sleep. She called me at 2 a.m, panicking. Grandma, what if I'm wrong? What if everything I've built falls apart tomorrow? What if I'm not good enough? I told her something my own grandmother had told me decades ago. Sweetheart, being good enough has nothing to do with whether other people recognize your worth. It has everything to do with whether you recognize it yourself. You've already proven you belong in that boardroom. Now you just need to walk in there believing it. The next morning, Emma walked into that boardroom wearing her best suit, not designer, not expensive, but professional and her own. She looked at the 15 faces staring at her with varying degrees of skepticism and hostility. She saw Alexander sitting at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. And she began. 6 months ago, I was about to lose my job because my supervisor felt threatened by my competence. Today, I'm standing before you to present a complete restructuring of Blackwell Enterprises' top 5 strategic initiatives. If you're wondering how a junior marketer with 3 months' experience ended up in this position, the answer is simple. I told the CEO the truth. And he was brave enough to listen. For the next 2 hours, Emma walked them through everything. She showed them the data on how their current initiatives were failing the sustainability project that barely reduced carbon footprint, the diversity program with an 85% turnover rate, the community outreach that communities actually resented as exploitation. Then she showed them her alternatives. Real sustainability that would cost more upfront but positioned the company as an industry leader. Diversity initiatives that focused on changing company culture rather than just hiring numbers. Community partnerships that shared profits and power rather than just writing checks for photo opportunities. Employee wellness that addressed the systemic overwork rather than offering gym memberships no one had time to use. Product development that prioritized human need over profit margins. These initiatives will cost more money, she said. They will require real change, not just surface adjustments. They will make some people uncomfortable, especially people who benefit from the current system. But they will also make Blackwell Enterprises into something more than just another corporation. They will make you matter. One of the board members, an older man who'd been with the company for 30 years, raised his hand. Miss Thompson, these are very idealistic proposals. But we answer to shareholders. They expect returns on investment, not social experiments. With respect, sir, I'm not proposing social experiments. I'm proposing sound business strategy. Every piece of data shows that companies with genuine commitment to sustainability, diversity, and community outperform their competitors long-term. Customers, especially younger customers, are demanding corporate responsibility. The best talent wants to work for companies that stand for something. This isn't idealism, it's survival. Another board member spoke up. You've been with this company for 9 months. What makes you think you understand our business better than people who've been here for decades? Before Emma could answer, Alexander spoke. Because in 9 months, Miss Thompson has accomplished what we failed to do in decades. She made people believe this company could be something more than a profit machine. She assembled cross-functional teams that actually work together instead of competing. She earned the respect of employees at every level, not through authority but through competence. And she did it while facing sabotage, harassment, and constant undermining from people who felt threatened by change. If you want to question her qualifications, I suggest you first examine what qualified the rest of us to create the problems she's trying to fix. The room went quiet. Alexander had never spoken that way to the board before, never challenged them, never defended anyone against their criticism. Emma saw several board members exchange glances. Then the oldest board member, a woman in her 70s who'd been silent until now, spoke. Mr. Blackwell, am I to understand that you support Miss Thompson's proposals? Completely. And if the board rejects them, you'll have my resignation. Gasps around the table. Alexander never made threats, never showed his hand, never put himself on the line for anything. Alexander, James Morrison said quietly, "Think about what you're saying. I have thought about it. James, for 5 years I've been thinking about what kind of leader I want to be. Miss Thompson's initiatives represent everything I wanted this company to become when my father died. If this board isn't willing to support real change, then I'm leading the wrong company." The elderly board member smiled. "Well, that's the most interesting thing I've heard in this boardroom in 30 years. Miss Thompson, you've managed to do what I thought was impossible. You've made Alexander Blackwell care about something other than maintaining his father's legacy. For that alone, you have my vote." She looked around the table. "I propose we approve Miss Thompson's initiatives on a trial basis. 18 months to show results. If the metrics support her projections, we expand them company-wide. If not, we re-evaluate. All in favor?" My dears, Emma told me later that watching that vote was the most surreal moment of her life. One by one, hands rose. Not unanimously, there were 3 board members who voted against, who saw Emma as a threat and Alexander's support of her as weakness. But it didn't matter. The majority voted yes. Emma's initiatives were approved. Blackwell Enterprises was going to change. And in that moment, standing in that boardroom, Emma realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life trying to prove she was good enough for rooms like this. But the truth was, rooms like this needed to prove they were good enough for people like her. After the meeting, Alexander found her in her office. She was staring at her computer screen, not really seeing it, trying to process what had just happened. "You did it," he said from the doorway. "We did it. You put your job on the line for me. Actually, I put my job on the line for what we're trying to build. You were just the inspiration." Emma turned to face him. "Alexander, what happens now?" Now I take you to dinner. We celebrate. And then tomorrow we start the real work of changing this company. I meant what happens with us." He walked into the room and closed the door. "I think you know what I want to happen with us. The question is what you want." Emma stood up. "I want something that's probably impossible. I want a relationship with someone who sees me as an equal, not a project or a symbol. I want to keep working here and actually change things without everyone assuming it's because we're sleeping together. I want to not have to choose between my career and my personal life. I want all of it, Alexander. And I have no idea how to make that work in the real world. Then we figure it out together. We set boundaries. We're transparent with HR. We don't hide, but we don't make it the focus either. We let our work speak for itself. People will still talk. People are already talking. But Emma, I spent 5 years caring more about what people thought than about what I wanted. I'm done with that. If you're worried about appearances, I'll step back. But if you're worried about us, don't be. We're both strong enough to handle whatever comes next." He was right. They were. That night, they went to dinner at a small restaurant in Queen's Emma's neighborhood, not his world. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. About the initiatives, yes, but also about Emma's family, about Alexander's sister Caroline, who he was slowly rebuilding their relationship with, about dreams they'd both stopped letting themselves have. And when Alexander walked Emma to her door, he kissed her. Gentle and careful, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held too tight. "I'm terrified," he admitted, "me too. But I think that's how you know it matters. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow was always going to change. Now we just get to decide how." The next year was everything they'd hoped for and everything they'd feared. Emma's initiatives rolled out slowly, methodically, with constant adjustments based on real-world results. The sustainability project actually reduced the company's carbon footprint by 40% while saving money on energy costs. The diversity initiative focused on mentorship and culture change, and within a year, retention rates for underrepresented groups improved by 60%. The community partnerships became models that other companies studied. The wellness program addressed workload and mental health, leading to a 25% reduction in burnout-related turnover. The product development strategy launched 3 products that addressed real needs rather than manufactured ones, and all 3 became bestsellers. Blackwell Enterprises was changing. And so were Emma and Alexander. Their relationship became an open secret, not hidden, but not flaunted. They worked together during the day, kept clear professional boundaries, and built a personal life outside the office. Alexander met Emma's parents, sat at their modest kitchen table, and listened to her father's stories about working in auto shops. Emma traveled with Alexander to visit his sister Caroline in California and watched him apologize for not being there when she needed him. They grew together in ways neither of them expected, but not everyone was happy about the changes. Victoria Chen left the company after a mutual agreement that involved a settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. 3 senior executives who tried to undermine Emma's initiatives were forced out when their sabotage became undeniable. 2 board members resigned, claiming the company had lost its way. The resistance was real, but so was the progress 1 year after that board meeting. Emma was promoted to Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, a position created specifically for her, reporting directly to Alexander. The promotion was based on measurable results, documented by independent consultants, leaving no room for anyone to claim it was favoritism. Her salary tripled. She paid off her student loans. She bought her parents a new car. And she realized that success felt different when you earned it on your own terms, but the real transformation wasn't in titles or salaries. It was in the culture. Employees started speaking up in meetings. New ideas came from unexpected places. People stopped working purely out of fear and started working because they believed in something. Blackwell Enterprises wasn't perfect, no company is, but it was becoming a place where caring wasn't considered weakness anymore. 2 years after they met in that elevator, Alexander proposed. Not in some grand public gesture, but in Emma's tiny apartment in Queens, surrounded by boxes, because she was finally moving into a place she'd bought herself. "I know this breaks every romantic convention," he said, getting down on one knee among the cardboard and packing tape. "I know I'm supposed to do this at a fancy restaurant or on a beach somewhere. But the truth is, I fell in love with you in the least romantic place imaginable, a corporate elevator, while you were crying about losing your job. So it seems fitting that I ask you to marry me in your old apartment, surrounded by evidence that you've built a life completely on your own terms. Emma Thompson, will you marry me?" Emma looked at this man who'd once been called the Ice King, this man who now laughed freely, who'd learned to show emotion, who'd become someone even his own sister barely recognized. Emma looked at this man who'd once been called the Ice King, this man who now laughed freely, who'd learned to show emotion, who'd become someone even his own sister barely recognized. Yes, but I have conditions, he laughed. Of course you do, I'm keeping my last name. We're signing a prenup that protects what I've earned separately from what you inherited. I'm not quitting my job, and I'm not moving into some executive role I didn't earn. And we're doing couples therapy from day one because I watched too many marriages fail to think love alone is enough. Done. Anything else? Yes, I need you to understand that I'm not the girl you found crying in an elevator anymore. I've changed. I've become someone stronger, more confident, more willing to take up space. That might be harder to love than the vulnerable version you met. Alexander pulled her close. Emma, I fell in love with you precisely because you were strong enough to be vulnerable. Because you cared enough to cry. Because you refused to let anyone, including me, make you smaller than you are. You becoming even more yourself isn't something to fear. It's everything I wanted for you. For us, they got married 6 months later in a small ceremony that scandalized society pages and delighted everyone who actually knew them. Emma's family from Queens filled half the church. Alexander's sister Caroline was the maid of honor. James Morrison was the best man. And the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises married a girl who'd once thought she'd lose everything. In a ceremony that cost less than most corporate dinners but meant more than any business deal, the marriage wasn't always easy. They both worked too much. They argued about work-life balance, about boundaries, about whose turn it was to compromise. Emma struggled with the wealth gap between them, struggled with living in a world where money was never a concern, when she remembered every meal her parents had skipped to pay her tuition. Alexander struggled with his own privilege, learning to truly listen when Emma explained things he'd never had to think about. But they worked at it. They went to therapy. They made time for each other. They remembered that elevator moment when everything changed when a man who never smiled met a woman who was crying. And both of them found the courage to be honest 3 years after they met. Emma launched a non-profit called Elevator Moments, an organization dedicated to helping young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds navigate corporate environments. She funded it herself with her salary, refusing to take money from Alexander or Blackwell Enterprises. The program paired young professionals with mentors, provided professional development, and most importantly created safe spaces for people to be honest about their struggles without fear of judgment. You know what I learned in that elevator? Emma told me once. I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pretending everything is fine. We spend so much energy trying to look perfect, trying to never let anyone see us struggling. But that's when we're most alone. That's when the people who could help us don't even know we need help. Alexander saw me at my absolute worst, and instead of judging me, he recognized himself in my pain. That's what Elevator Moments is about, creating a culture where it's okay to not be okay. Where vulnerability isn't weakness, where asking for help is strength. 5 years after that board meeting, Blackwell Enterprises won multiple awards for corporate responsibility, workplace culture, and sustainable business practices. Alexander was named one of the most innovative CEOs in America, not for profits, but for proving that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. And Emma, my brilliant granddaughter, became one of the most sought-after speakers on corporate culture change, telling her story to audiences around the world. But the story I love most happened just last month. Emma and Alexander were walking through the Blackwell Enterprises building. They still worked there, still pushing for change, still fighting the good fight. They stepped into an elevator, and a young man was crying. Quiet tears, the kind you try to hide but can't quite manage. Alexander and Emma looked at each other. Without a word, Emma turned to the young man and said, "Are you all right?" The young man looked up, recognized them both, and tried to compose himself. "I'm fine. I'm sorry. This is so unprofessional." "No," Alexander said gently. "This is human. And we've both been exactly where you are. Would you like to talk about it?" That young man's name was Marcus. He was about to be fired by a supervisor who felt threatened by his ideas. He thought his career was over. He thought he'd failed. He thought he was alone. An hour later, he was sitting in Alexander's office, being offered a position on Emma's strategic initiatives team. Because Emma and Alexander had learned something that day in the elevator 5 years ago, learned it and never forgot it. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is see someone else's pain and recognize it as real. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is use your position to help someone who has none. Sometimes the best changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Now, my dears, let me tell you what I've learned from watching Emma's journey. The first lesson is this: your worst moments don't define you, how you respond to them does. Emma could have hidden her tears that day, could have pretended everything was fine. Instead, she was honest about her pain, and that honesty changed everything. We live in a world that tells us to always be strong, always be composed, always have it together. But sometimes strength looks like admitting you're struggling. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see you're not okay. The second lesson: the right person will love you for your truth, not your perfection. Alexander didn't fall in love with some polished, perfect version of Emma. He fell in love with a woman who was crying in an elevator, who spoke her mind even when it was risky, who challenged him and pushed him and refused to make herself smaller for his comfort. Too many of us waste time trying to be what we think others want. But the people who matter will want you exactly as you are: messy, imperfect, beautifully human. The third lesson: power is only meaningful when you use it to help others. Alexander had been CEO for 5 years before Emma, and in all that time, he'd never truly used his power to change things. He'd maintained the status quo, avoided conflict, protected his position. But when he finally used his power to support Emma, to defend her initiatives, to stand up to the board, that's when he became a real leader. We all have power in our own spheres. The question is whether we use it to maintain our comfort or to make things better for others. The fourth lesson: don't let other people's limitations become your ceiling. Everyone told Emma she couldn't succeed because of where she came from, because she didn't have the right connections, because she didn't play the political games. And if she'd believed them, they would have been right. But she refused to accept their limitations as her reality. She worked harder, thought smarter, and most importantly, she believed she deserved to be in those rooms even when everyone else doubted it. Your background doesn't determine your future unless you let it. The fifth lesson: real change is uncomfortable, expensive, and absolutely necessary. Emma's initiatives cost money. They disrupted comfortable power structures. They made people angry. But they also made Blackwell Enterprises into something worth being part of. We often avoid making changes because they're hard, because they'll upset people, because we're not sure they'll work. But the alternative is stagnation. The alternative is maintaining systems that harm people just because they're familiar. Sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing. The sixth lesson: love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone worth doing the hard work with. Emma and Alexander's relationship wasn't easy. They came from different worlds, had different struggles, needed to learn how to understand each other's experiences. But they chose to do that work. They went to therapy, had difficult conversations, made space for each other's growth. Too many relationships fail because people think love should be effortless. But lasting love is built on effort: the daily choice to understand, to support, to show up even when it's hard. The seventh lesson: your success should make room for others, not just yourself. Emma didn't just climb the ladder and pull it up behind her. She started elevator moments to help other young professionals who were struggling the way she had. She used her platform to advocate for people who didn't have voices in those rooms. Success that only benefits you isn't real success, it's just accumulation. Real success lifts others as you rise. And the final lesson, my dears, the one that matters most, it's never too late for a second chance at happiness, at purpose, at becoming who you're meant to be. Alexander was 42 years old when he met Emma, and he'd spent decades becoming someone he didn't really like. But he changed, he grew. He became someone his own sister could love again, someone his employees could respect, someone who actually made a difference. Emma was 26 and thought her career was over, but it was really just beginning. Neither of them stayed stuck in the story others had written for them. They wrote new ones. So to all you young women listening, especially those of you who feel like you're not enough, not educated enough, not connected enough, not polished enough to succeed in worlds that weren't built for you, listen to your old grandma Margaret. You are enough, exactly as you are. Last week, Emma told me she's pregnant. She and Alexander are going to have a baby. And you know what she said to me? Grandma, I'm terrified. What if I can't balance everything? What if I have to choose between being a good mother and being good at my job? What if I fail at both? I told her the same thing I'm telling all of you. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. You just have to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep doing the hard work of being fully human. That's all any of us can do. This morning, I got a call from Emma. She was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. She'd just come from a meeting where a young woman she'd been mentoring through elevator moments had been promoted to director level at another company. That woman told me that a year ago, she was ready to quit her career entirely. She thought she'd never be good enough. And now she's leading a whole department, Grandma. She's changing things at her company the way I changed things at Blackwell. This is what it's all about. This is why that day in the elevator mattered. And she's right, my dears. That's exactly why it mattered. Not because it led to a fairy tale romance, though that's a lovely bonus. Not because Emma became successful, though she earned every bit of that success. It mattered because one moment of honesty, one moment of vulnerability, one moment of seeing another person's humanity created ripples that are still spreading. Alexander learned to be human again. Emma learned to believe in herself. Marcus found an opportunity. That young woman Emma mentored found her courage. And countless others have been touched by the changes they started. 5 years ago, a young woman cried in an elevator and thought her life was falling apart. Instead, it was falling into place. Because sometimes the worst moments are really doorways to the best ones. Sometimes the people who seem the most untouchable are the ones who most need someone to reach them. And sometimes all it takes to change everything is the courage to be honest about your pain and the willingness to see someone else's. My granddaughter Emma taught me that. And Alexander Blackwell, the CEO who never smiled, taught me that it's never too late to thaw a frozen heart. Together, they taught me that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even in a corporate elevator between floors 42 and 68. When one person was crying and another person chose to care. So the next time you're in an elevator, my dears, literal or metaphorical, and you see someone struggling, don't look away. Don't pretend you don't notice. Ask if they're okay. Offer help if you can. You never know what that moment of kindness might start. You never know whose life you might change, or how much they might change yours in return. That's the real story. Not about a CEO and an employee. Not about power and success. But about two broken people who found each other at exactly the right time and helped each other become whole. About vulnerability becoming strength. About honesty creating connection. About choosing to care in a world that often tells us not to. And to anyone listening who's crying in their own elevator right now, metaphorically speaking, whether it's because of a job you're losing, a dream that seems impossible, a situation that feels hopeless, please hear me. This is not the end of your story. This might be the beginning of something better than you can imagine. Your tears today might be the catalyst for your triumph tomorrow. Your breakdown might be the prelude to your breakthrough. Just be honest about your pain. Ask for help when you need it. Trust that the right people will see your worth even when you can't see it yourself. And remember that every great story has dark moments. That's what makes the light so beautiful when it finally comes. My granddaughter found her light in an elevator with a man who'd forgotten how to smile. You'll find yours too, my dear. I promise you that. You just have to keep showing up, keep being brave enough to be real, and keep believing that you deserve good things even when the world tells you otherwise. Now, if this old grandmother's story has touched your heart in any way, if Emma and Alexander's journey has given you hope or inspiration, or just reminded you that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, then do me a favor. Subscribe to Nana's Memory Lane so I can keep sharing these stories with you. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what lesson resonated most with you. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's crying in their own elevator, someone who's forgotten how to believe in themselves. Someone who thinks their story is already over because stories like this, my dear, stories about real people facing real struggles and finding real hope, these are the stories that matter. These are the stories that remind us we're not alone. These are the stories that change the world, one honest moment at a time. Thank you for listening to this old grandmother's tale. Thank you for letting me share Emma's journey with you. And remember, the next time life knocks you down, the next time you find yourself crying in an elevator, literal or metaphorical, that might just be the moment everything changes. That might just be when your Alexander Blackwell walks in and sees you. Really sees you, or better yet, that might be when you see yourself clearly for the first time, not as someone who's failing, but as someone who's brave enough to feel, strong enough to be vulnerable, and powerful enough to rise again. Until next time, my dears. This is Grandma Margaret from Nana's Memory Lane, reminding you that your story isn't over. It's just beginning. And the best chapters are still ahead. God bless you all. If you enjoyed this story from Nana's Memory Lane, please like, subscribe, and share. Every grandmother has wisdom to share, and every story has the power to change a life. What will your elevator moment be?